Welcome to Mind Architect Lab, Deep Dive. What you are about to hear is a different kind of podcast. Each episode is built on a comprehensive research report, meticulously compiled by our human team. We dive deep into topics to bring you insights you won't find anywhere else. To bring this dense research to life, we use advanced AI-powered voices. This allows us to create in-depth, long-form content for you every week. While this technology is incredible, it isn't always perfect. You may hear an occasional quirk or a slight imperfection in the audio. We believe this is a small trade-off for the quality of the information we can share. And because we value transparency, the complete, detailed research brief this conversation is based on is available to every listener. You'll find the link in the description. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's begin the deep dive.
Mind Architect Lab Deep Dive.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you're listening, and especially if you're at that stage in life, where maybe you're thinking about retirement or already there, maybe you're grappling with this really constant, quite painful feeling, that sort of heavy, gnawing anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Deep down. And it often comes paired with this consuming sense of feeling, unappreciated, maybe even undervalued.
Despite everything you do.
Exactly. Despite pouring immense emotional energy and, frankly, often thousands and thousands of dollars into your adult children's lives.
It's an incredibly common dynamic, really pervasive, and often profoundly isolating for the parent, usually the mother. We know so many women, maybe in their 60s or older, who've spent decades, literally decades, defining themselves through that provider role.
And they feel trapped now.
Completely trapped, stuck in this cycle where it feels like the only way to show love, or maybe the only way to manage their own anxiety about their kids, is to keep writing those checks. Even when deep down they know those checks are draining their own security, their own future. So we've really dug into the research here, looking at sources that guide us on the emotional and financial limits of this kind of generosity. We want to understand why this pattern takes hold so strongly.
And crucially, how to stop it. How to break the cycle without, completely blowing up the family relationship.
That's the goal. Because it's not about cutting ties, usually. It's about finding a healthier way.
So our mission today in this deep dive is really to analyze this challenging dynamic. Not just talk about it abstractly, but pull out actionable steps. We need to find those vital insights that can help you reclaim your life.
Reclaim your financial security, which is so critical at this stage.
Absolutely. Right. And recover that sense of self-worth that somehow got completely tangled up in your child's needs and maybe their problems.
And we have to start by facing a core truth that comes through loud and clear from the research. This is maybe our provocative statement for today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Continuous, unreciprocated generosity, financial, emotional, all of it towards adult children. It isn't actually an act of pure, unconditional love. In many cases, the sources suggest it functions as a form of self-harm.
Wow. Self-harm. That's strong language.
It is. But it's rooted in things like misplaced guilt, maybe past regrets, and often a deeply enmeshed identity where your sense of self is completely fused with your child.
That is definitely a weighty truth to absorb.
Yeah.
Especially when you feel like, but I'm just trying to be a good mother. I'm doing my best for the people I love most.
Of course. The intention is almost always rooted in love. But the impact, that's what we need to examine.
Okay. But let's talk about the reward then. If someone does this hard work, faces this truth, what's the gold on the other side?
It's profound, truly. We're talking about liberation, real freedom.
Liberation from what specifically?
Liberation from that daily financial fear, that constant worry about money running out. Liberation from that feeling of being taken for granted, that sense of resentment that builds up.
And the anxiety. Getting rid of that knot in your stomach.
Absolutely. The goal here isn't just about fixing your adult child. That's actually secondary. The primary goal is this life-changing rediscovery of yourself.
Finding your own identity again.
Yes. Your purpose, your worth, completely separate from the role of mom the provider that you've maybe occupied for 30, 40, even 50 years.
And when you find that solid sense of self again, what happens to the relationship with the kids?
That's when you can finally shift. You can move towards a sustainable, respectful relationship, an adult-to-adult relationship, one that's based on mutual love and actual choice, not on this heavy, corrosive weight of obligation and, frankly, guilt payments.
Okay, that sounds like a worthwhile goal. So where do we start? How do we begin to untangle this, right? So before we can even think about changing things, like setting a boundary or saying no, we absolutely have to understand the why. What are the powerful psychological forces actually driving this behavior?
Exactly. Why do so many women, especially as you said, at this critical stage, maybe nearing or in retirement, keep writing those checks, even when every rational part of their brain and their bank account is screaming, stop?
It feels irrational from the outside sometimes.
But it's not really. Understanding the drivers is the essential first step, because if we don't address that psychological engine underneath it all, any boundary you try to set, it's just going to crumble. It won't hold.
Makes sense. You have to treat the cause, not just the symptom.
Precisely. And the sources we looked at, they draw a really critical line right at the beginning. A distinction every mother caught in this cycle needs to grasp fully. And that's the vast difference between healthy support and, well, toxic enabling.
Okay, support versus enabling. Let's spend some real time on those definitions.
Yeah.
Because you're right, that feels like the hinge point for everything else.
It really is. So, support. In clinical terms, right? It's defined as behavior that empowers independence. It's about helping your adult child build their own strength.
What does that look like in practice?
It looks like helping them build resilience, teaching them how to cope with setbacks, maybe providing a bit of a safety net so they can take reasonable risks that actually build their confidence and their competence over time.
So support acknowledges that life is hard, that there are obstacles.
Yes, absolutely. But the focus of support is always on helping them plan to overcome the obstacle themselves. You're not jumping in to remove the obstacle for them. You're maybe offering guidance, perspective, like being a coach from the sidelines.
Okay, I like that analogy. You're there to cheer them on while they climb the mountain. You're not carrying them up.
Exactly. You might hand them a map, maybe point out a good foothold, but they have to do the climbing. That's support. It fosters competence.
All right. So if support is the map and compass, what does enabling look like? How do the sources define that?
Enabling is basically the opposite. It's defined very clearly as fixing problems for others in a way that interferes with growth and responsibility.
Interferes with growth. That's key.
It is. It often involves this consistent pattern of things like financial bailouts, paying the rent again, covering the credit card bill, constantly rescuing them from the natural consequences of their choices.
Or making decisions for them, like calling the landlord for them.
Yes, that too. Overprotective decision-making that really goes way beyond what an adult needs or should expect. The sources are clear. Enabling often looks like kindness on the surface. It feels like love.
Because you want to help. You see them struggling.
Of course. That instinct is incredibly powerful, especially for mothers. That feeling you'd, step in front of a moving train for your child, it's primal.
But applying that instinct to a capable adult, that's where it goes wrong.
That's where it becomes a problem. The sources suggest that instinct, when it's misapplied to an adult child who could manage, actually becomes a significant deterrent. It holds them back. It prevents their emotional and financial muscles from developing.
It kind of metastasizes, you said, into this toxic enabling cycle.
It really does. And this leads us straight to the painful, often hidden, maybe even subconscious message that gets sent when a parent constantly enables.
Okay, what's the hidden message?
When a mother overly rescues her adult child from every single problem, big or small, the implicit message that child eventually internalizes is devastating. It's, you're not competent, you can't actually make it on your own without me.
Wow. Okay. I hadn't quite framed it like that before, but that lands. That explains so much about the dynamic, doesn't it?
It really shifts the perspective, because think about it. The mother thinks she's showing love through her sacrifice. She's giving, and she naturally, understandably, expects appreciation in return.
But the child,
even as they take the money or accept the help, maybe gratefully in the moment, is simultaneously absorbing that message. Mom doesn't think I can handle this. And they start to resent it. They resent the implicit judgment of their incompetence, even while needing the bailout.
which creates that awful cycle of mutual resentment we talked about. The mother feels unappreciated, deeply undervalued. That's often why you're listening today, right? You feel that sting.
And the child feels controlled, maybe suffocated by the unspoken strings attached to the help, the expectation of gratitude. And this feeling actually perpetuates their dependency, ironically. Sometimes it even makes them pull away emotionally to create space.
So the distinction is huge. Support empowers, enabling cripples.
In a nutshell, yes.
Okay, so if that's the functional driver, the difference in the action, what's the emotional engine behind the enabling? It feels like guilt has to play a massive role here. Let's talk about that burden for mothers.
Absolutely. Guilt is enormous. Enabling behavior isn't just random. It's often fueled by this potent, toxic cocktail of internalized guilt and what the sources refer to as societal myths about motherhood.
The good mother myth.
Exactly. Our culture, especially for generations of women who really prioritize parenting, puts mothers on this kind of heroic pedestal. It creates these wildly unrealistic expectations about what a good mother must be, must do, must sacrifice.
Total self-sacrifice, always putting the child first no matter their age.
Right. And so when a mother deviates even slightly from that impossible, perfect mother script, maybe she finally decides to prioritize her own retirement savings, or she sets a boundary that disappoints the child, or even just takes an afternoon off for herself.
Boom. The guilt hits.
Intense, sometimes paralyzing guilt.
Yeah.
The sources call these universal feelings for many mothers. It's deeply ingrained.
And that guilt becomes transactional.
Precisely. This is where it gets really insidious. Guilt is effectively converted into currency. Research actually links this specific type of maternal guilt to coping strategies. Things like, well, buying unnecessary things for the child.
Or in this context, paying their rent, covering their car payment.
Exactly. The mother gives, often financially, to temporarily soothe her own feeling of guilt, to lessen her own anxiety or discomfort. It's less about meeting the child's actual developmental needs at that point, and more about managing her own internal state.
Wow. So the giving is almost like self-medication for the mother's guilt.
In many ways, yes. And that sets up this incredibly destructive, self-perpetuating trap. Let's trace it. The mother feels guilt, maybe triggered by a societal myth or a past regret.
Okay.
So she gives or enables to alleviate her own discomfort, her anxiety. Step 2.
Right.
Step 3, that action, the enabling, fosters dependency in the adult child. They learn not to solve the problem themselves.
Because mom will handle it.
Exactly. Step 4, the child's continual dependency, their failure to launch successfully, reflects back on the mother. She sees it as her failure as a parent.
Which generates, oh no.
Exactly. It generates more guilt, profound guilt, which then compels her, in step 5, to give even more to try and fix the situation and assuage the new, deeper guilt.
Oh, that is a vicious cycle. She's essentially using her checkbook to manage her own anxiety and feelings of failure, but it just makes the underlying problem worse.
Well, that's the mechanism perfectly described. And when that pattern, guilt-driven self-sacrifice, becomes the mother's core way of operating, her main identity, it solidifies. It becomes what the sources call a martyr complex.
The martyr mother. We've all seen depictions of that.
And it's a painful reality for many. This parent is someone who just overdoes everything. They're constantly picking up after every misstep, substituting their own energy, their own money, their own worry for the child's. They feel responsible for ensuring the adult child's life runs smoothly.
And the chronic pain she feels, that deep feeling of being undervalued that brought us here.
It's the direct, understandable result of this escalating sacrifice. She's pouring everything out, her time, her money, her emotional reserves, her future security, and it's failing. It's failing to produce the competent, independent adult child she hoped for, and it's failing to bring her the genuine appreciation and respect she craves. She's trading her life for a false sense of peace that never quite arrives.
So enabling is the action, guilt is the currency. What's holding it all together? You mentioned another driver.
Yes. If guilt is the currency, the final, perhaps deepest driver is the structural glue holding this whole painful system in place. Enmeshment.
Enmeshment. Okay, let's really unpack that one. It sounds intense and maybe hard to recognize if you're inside it.
Very hard. It's more than just being close as a family. Enmeshment is a specific family dynamic where the boundaries between individuals become incredibly blurred, almost non-existent.
Blurred how?
Individual identities get lost. Loyalty to the family unit and intense emotional closeness are valued above everything else. Often, this comes at a really high cost to individual autonomy, to personal growth.
Can you give an analogy?
Sure. Imagine the family members, maybe particularly mother and child, sharing one large emotional skin. If the child gets a metaphorical scratch, faces a setback, feels anxious, the mother feels that pain directly, intensely, as if it were her own, and vice versa. There's very little separation between my feelings and your feelings, my problems and your problems.
Okay, that's a powerful image. Sharing one emotional skin. So what are the signs? If a mother listening is wondering, is this me? What symptoms might signal this level of fusion?
Well, one common sign is role reversal, sometimes called parentification. This is where the mother, maybe subtly, maybe overtly, starts treating the adult child like her therapist or confidant.
Sharing her own problems, anxieties, marital issues.
Exactly. Burdening the child with adult emotional issues, essentially making the child feel responsible for consoling the parent or making the parent happy. It completely flips the healthy emotional balance.
And then, critically for the child's development, there's the lack of individuality that comes from this fusion.
Huge. The adult child in an enmeshed system often functions more like an extension of their parents than a separate individual. They might look like an adult, have a job, maybe even their own place.
But inwardly?
Inwardly, they deeply doubt their own reasoning and capabilities. They constantly seek parental approval or rescue because the underlying message they've absorbed for years, maybe decades, is, you can't really do life well without me. Your decisions aren't valid unless I approve. And your success or failure directly impacts my well-being.
That's crippling for the child.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the flip side, the emotional fusion from the mother's perspective. That must be where the anxiety really takes root for her.
Absolutely. Her self-worth becomes fundamentally child-based. She feels good about herself only when the child is succeeding, thriving, happy. But if the child fails, struggles, makes a mistake, she feels it as a personal failure, leading to diminished self-worth.
Her whole emotional state is tethered to their performance.
Completely. It creates this unsustainable level of anxiety for her because she feels responsible for managing their outcomes, which she ultimately can't control.
Okay, this brings us to what you call the crucial, painful paradox.
Yeah.
The thing that connects back to the mother's anxiety and the enabling. If her self-worth is all tied up with the child, and maybe she's feeling lonely or insecure herself, perhaps the empty nest is hitting hard, retirement feels uncertain. What is her deepest subconscious fear?
It's the child's complete and total independence.
Independence. But isn't that what every parent says they want?
Consciously, yes, absolutely. But subconsciously, for the enmeshed mother whose identity and worth are fused with the child, a fully autonomous child, financially secure, emotionally independent, making their own decisions confidently doesn't need constant fixing.
And if they don't need fixing?
They are free to move on. They can leave the intense gravitational pull of the enmeshed relationship. They can build their own life separate from her. And that feels subconsciously like abandonment, like a loss of self.
So, wait. Are you saying the constant fixing, the rescuing, the enabling, it's not just a reaction to the child's problems?
The sources suggest it functions, often unconsciously, as a strategy for the mother to manage her own terror of abandonment, her own fear of becoming irrelevant.
By keeping the child dependent.
By fostering dependency, yes. It ensures the child still needs her, still stays close, still relies on her. It keeps the enmeshed system intact.
That's a really difficult concept to face.
Yeah.
That the child's failure to launch might not just be an unfortunate outcome.
It might, in some deep unconscious way, be serving the mother's need to stay needed. To avoid her own feelings of emptiness or fear, her pain of feeling undervalued then isn't just about lack of gratitude. It's rooted in her primal terror that despite all the money, all the effort, the child is still emotionally pulling away or rejecting her attempts to stay fused because they do crave independence even while taking the help.
Wow. Okay. That lays the groundwork. Understanding those drivers, the support and the bullying distinction, the guilt machine, the enmeshment is huge. Right. We spent some really necessary time digging into the why, understanding those psychological engines, the guilt, the martyrdom, the enmeshment. But now we need to pivot and look squarely at the consequences, the tangible harm.
And this is where, as you said, it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite alarming. Because the costs are staggering. And for our listeners, particularly those over 60, maybe looking at retirement or already in it, these numbers aren't just abstract statistics.
No, they represent a direct threat. A threat to their security, their independence, their ability to live out their later years with dignity and peace of mind.
Exactly. The sources we examined are absolutely sobering on this. The financial help that mothers especially provide isn't benign generosity. It's often a direct, quantifiable threat to their own long-term survival. We have to break through the denial that so often surrounds this kind of emotionally driven spending.
Let's start with some hard data then. What are the numbers telling us? I know you mentioned a 2024 ARP survey.
Yes, it found that a huge majority, 75% of parents, are providing some form of financial support to at least one adult child. So if you're doing this, you are definitely not alone. It's become the norm, not the exception.
75%. Wow. And it's not just pocket money we're talking about, is it?
Not even close. Another report, this one from savings.com, drilled down into the amounts. The average financial support being given, $1,474 per month.
Per month?
Per month. Do the math on that. That's nearly $18,000 a year, consistently flowing out of the parents', often the mother's, bank account and into the adult child's life.
$18,000 a year. That's significant income for many retirees.
Yeah.
Where is that money even going? Is it just for emergencies?
That's what parents often tell themselves, but the data shows otherwise. It's often going towards sustaining a lifestyle. 83% of the adult kids receiving help use it for groceries, 65% for cell phone bills.
Okay, essentials maybe.
But it doesn't stop there. It covers student loan payments, car insurance, rent, or mortgage payments. And get this, for nearly half, 46%, it even helps pay for things like vacations.
Vacations. Paid for by parents who might be struggling themselves.
It happens. This isn't just crisis management. It's often subsidizing a standard of living the adult child hasn't achieved on their own yet.
Okay, but here's the finding that really leaped out at me, especially thinking about our listeners, women maybe in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, the connection to their own retirement savings.
This is the absolute crucial financial takeaway. The sources found that working parents who are financially supporting their grown children are contributing, on average, over twice as much money each month to their adult kids as they are putting into their own retirement funds.
Say that again, twice as much to the kids.
As to their own retirement, let that sink in. Think about the power of compound interest, especially in the decade or two leading up to retirement. You are actively funding another adult's life more heavily month after month than you are funding your own future security.
Let's make that concrete. You mentioned a quick generosity audit idea. If someone is giving that average amount, say $4,474 a month, starting at age 60, what does that look like?
Okay, quick back-of-the-envelope calculation. $1,474 a month is $17,688 a year. Over 5 years, from 60 to 65, that's nearly $88,500 gone, just straight out the door.
$88,000.
Now, think about the opportunity cost. If that same money, that $1,474 a month, had been invested instead, even conservatively, let's say earning 5% a year over those 5 years, and then just left to grow for another 5 years until age 70, you're looking at a shortfall well into six figures in your retirement nest egg. That's the draining of a lifetime savings happening month by month.
And this isn't some abstract sacrifice happening somewhere else. These are active, daily choices parents are making that directly harm their own present and future.
Absolutely. The data is stark on the immediate sacrifices, too. 52%, more than half of parents supporting adult kids, say they are actively cutting back on their own living expenses to make it work.
Cutting back on their own food, heat, medications.
It can come down to that. A shocking 39% admit they are struggling to afford their own necessities because of the money going to their kids. Things like groceries, utility bills, essential healthcare.
That's heartbreaking. And what about savings?
Even worse, a full 50%, half of these parents are pulling money directly from their own savings accounts or their retirement funds. They're literally raiding the accounts meant for their own safety and security down the road.
The very funds they need to avoid becoming dependent later.
Exactly. And the long-term impact. It's terrifying, and often people postpone facing it until it's far too late to recover. The data shows somewhere between 27% and 33% of parents are actively postponing their planned retirement date. Sometimes indefinitely.
Working longer than they wanted, longer than maybe their health allows.
Yes, and perhaps the most sobering statistic for those already nearing or in retirement. 39% of parents currently providing support expect they will have to continue doing so even while they are in retirement.
So their golden years are going to be spent worrying about making ends meet, not just for themselves, but for their adult children too. That sounds incredibly stressful.
Anxious.
Deeply anxious. It paints a picture of retirement that's far from the secure, peaceful phase people work their whole lives for.
Okay. This denial you mentioned, it's powerful. How do people break through it? You mentioned the generosity audit as a first step.
Yes. This is often the first essential therapeutic step recommended in the sources. It's a quantitative accounting tool. Its whole purpose is to move the problem out of the realm of vague worry, oh, I feel like maybe I give too much, and into concrete, objective data.
Black and white numbers.
Exactly. I know I gave my son $800 for rent 4 times last year, plus $200 for his phone bill each month, plus I covered that $1,500 car repair. You need to track it.
Yeah.
Quantify the specific categories where the money is leaking out. Rent, groceries, cell phone, debt payments, emergency bailouts, vacations, whatever it is.
And then the crucial part, then you have to connect it to your own future. You need to calculate, maybe with a financial advisor's help, the 5-year and, more importantly, the 10-year retirement impact of those ongoing payments. What hole is this creating in your nest egg?
Because until you see that specific dollar amount, that six-figure gap maybe, you can always rationalize it away. Oh, it's just helping out. She's having a tough time. He'll get back on his feet soon.
Precisely. Those rationalizations are powerful protectors of the status quo. But once you see the hard number, $150,000 less for my retirement if this continues for 10 years, it transforms. It stops being just helping and becomes an objective, undeniable threat to your own survival.
And that provides the necessary, logical permission you need to finally say, enough. To change course, overriding that powerful emotional guilt we talked about.
It's often the catalyst for change, yes. Seeing the numbers in black and white.
Okay, the financial harm is stark. Devastating, really. But the cost isn't just monetary, is it? Let's talk about the invisible toll, the emotional burnout, the resentment.
Absolutely. The cost of this unchecked generosity goes way beyond the bank account. It creates this debilitating cycle of emotional exhaustion and deep, simmering resentment that can poison the entire parent-child relationship.
We hear a lot about burnout with parents of young kids, all the demands. But the sources say parental burnout syndrome looks different when your kids are adults.
It does, and it's profoundly complex. It's defined less by the sheer volume of tasks, although that can still be a factor if you're constantly running errands or managing their lives. But the core of it, for parents of adults, is this specific feeling of parental loss of control and influence.
Loss of control. How so?
It's that profound sense of helplessness. You're watching a full-grown adult, someone you love dearly, repeatedly make poor choices, financial, career, relationship, whatever it is. You know you have zero actual control over their decisions.
But you feel absolutely obligated to absorb the consequences, to clean up the mess.
Exactly. That gap between their autonomy and your perceived responsibility is where the burnout thrives. It's exhausting, feeling responsible for outcomes you can't dictate.
What are the signs? If a mother listening feels drained, what symptoms might point specifically to this kind of burnout?
The sources list several key indicators: persistent, deep exhaustion that sleep doesn't seem to fix, a feeling of emotional detachment, maybe feeling numb, or just going through the motions like you're in constant survival mode.
Irritability, too.
Yes. Increased irritability, a really short fuse, maybe snapping at people. Physical symptoms are common too: chronic headaches, stomach problems, muscle tension, maybe changes in appetite or sleep.
And loss of confidence.
A really crippling loss of confidence in yourself as a parent, feeling like, I must have failed somewhere along the line if my 30-year-old still can't manage their life. It feels like failing the final exam of parenting.
And this emotional drain, this burnout, this is the fertile ground where that undervalued feeling really grows, isn't it? It fuels that resentment cycle.
Absolutely. It strains the relationship from both directions, making everyone miserable in the end. The parents feel profoundly unappreciated for the sacrifices they're making, the stress they're enduring.
And the children.
The children, even while taking the help, often feel stifled. They feel controlled by the unspoken expectations, maybe guilty about their dependency, which can make them defensive or withdrawn. The mother feels this intense anger and frustration at an adult child's entitlement, which only drives a bigger wedge between them emotionally.
It's a lose-lose situation. Now, what's fascinating, and maybe counterintuitive, is the analysis of anxiety in all this. The sources suggest anxiety isn't just a result of the financial strain and resentment. It can actually be the cause of the enabling in the first place.
That is such a crucial insight for anyone caught in this pattern. Very often, mothers give financial support or step in to fix things in service of avoiding anxiety or discomfort, their own anxiety.
And you unpack that?
Think about it. The adult child calls, maybe in tears, "Mom, I can't make rent this month. I'm going to be evicted." The mother's immediate reaction is often intense anxiety, fear for her child's well-being, yes, but also her own discomfort with seeing her child suffer, her own fear of what might happen.
So the instinct is to make the problem and the anxiety disappear quickly.
Exactly. And the quickest way is often the financial fix. Writing the check, paying the bill online, it provides an immediate, temporary, soft landing. It silences the mother's worry about that specific crisis. In that moment, she buys herself some peace.
What's the long-term cost of constantly buying that peace? Constantly avoiding the discomfort of letting them struggle?
The long-term cost is that the avoidance systematically decreases our ability to tolerate discomfort. Every time the mother swoops in, she reinforces the idea to herself and her child that the anxiety of the situation is unbearable, intolerable. She never builds the muscle of sitting with the anxiety of, My child is struggling right now, but they are an adult and they must find their own solution.
So paradoxically, by constantly trying to eliminate anxiety in the short term, she makes her overall baseline anxiety worse over time.
Precisely. She becomes less resilient, more reactive to the next crisis. She's not just anxious because she gives so much. She gives so much as a way to try and quiet her own relentless anxiety. It becomes a dysfunctional emotional coping mechanism, and the currency she uses is her retirement fund.
Wow, okay. Financial harm, emotional burnout, feeding her own anxiety. And then there's the third major harm, the one that often hits parents the hardest when they realize it and motivates change. The fact that this cycle of help is actually damaging the adult child. It's fostering dependency.
Yes. This is often the most painful realization for a loving parent. The consistent rescuing, the constant bailouts, they teach the child something psychologists call learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. What does that mean?
It's a state where an individual, after experiencing repeated situations where they feel they have no control over negative outcomes because someone else always steps in or they perceive failure as total, essentially stops trying to change their circumstances. They learn deep down that their own efforts are futile.
Because they believe, consciously or not, why bother trying? I'll probably fail, and anyway, mom will fix it if I wait long enough.
Exactly that. They learn to be passive recipients of rescue rather than active solvers of their own problems.
So by overdoing things, by buying into the child's story of helplessness, I can't possibly manage this. The mother is inadvertently, unintentionally teaching them to be helpless. She's robbing them of their own power.
She is. Every time she steps in to fix something an adult could or should handle themselves, she's robbing them of a crucial opportunity, an opportunity to acquire essential, foundational life skills.
Skills like what?
Basic budgeting, negotiating with a landlord or a creditor, dealing with the frustration of a job search, making difficult decisions and living with the consequences. Simple problem solving. Enabling hinders problem-solving skills because the parent steals the learning moment away. The child never gets to experience the competence that comes from navigating a challenge successfully on their own.
And this dependency, this learned helplessness, this is what cultivates the very thing that causes the mother so much pain and makes her feel so undervalued. The child's sense of entitlement.
They are absolutely linked. When help is constant, expected, and unconditional, not tied to effort, the child eventually starts to view it as a right, not a gift. It becomes an expectation.
And the signs of that entitlement are pretty obvious, I imagine.
Usually impossible to miss. They expect help often immediately when a problem arises. They show little or no genuine appreciation when they get it. It's just what happens. They expect the parent to rescue them from the natural consequences of their own choices, maybe poor spending or not working hard enough.
And they might get angry or defensive if the help isn't instantly forthcoming.
Yes. Anger, guilt-tripping, don't you care if I'm homeless? Blaming the parent?
No.
Those are all classic signs that entitlement has taken root.
Okay, this brings us back full circle to that paradox we touched on earlier. How can the adult child seem both incredibly entitled, demanding help almost aggressively, and at the same time, fundamentally helpless, seemingly incapable of managing their own life? They seem like opposites.
The sources explain this duality really clearly. They are essentially two sides of the same coin. Both are symptoms stemming from the mother's history of enabling and that underlying message we talked about.
The "you're not competent" message.
Exactly. The learned helplessness is the child's internal reality. Deep down, I don't believe I can actually do this myself because I was never really allowed to learn how. Failure feels catastrophic. The entitlement is the external coping mechanism they develop. Therefore, since I can't do it, you must do it for me. It's your job. And you need to do it now because this anxiety is overwhelming.
So the child's seemingly ungrateful, demanding behavior isn't necessarily malicious. It's the predictable, learned symptom of the dependency the mother unintentionally cultivated.
It's the outward manifestation of that internal feeling of incompetence and the anxiety it creates. Understanding this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps explain it. And it underscores why the enabling has to stop for everyone's sake.
Okay, we've thoroughly analyzed the problem, looked at the staggering costs, financial and emotional, and really dug into the psychological roots. Now it's time to shift gears decisively. Let's move into action. What are the tools? What's the strategy to dismantle this dynamic?
This is where the work really begins. And the sources emphasize that before any external boundary, like saying no to a request for money, can actually hold firm, there needs to be a foundational internal shift within the mother herself.
An internal shift first, what does that involve?
It involves mastering the internal practice, the mindset of detachment with love. And we need to be incredibly clear here, especially for a mother who's drowning in guilt. Detachment is not abandonment.
That's important. Say that again.
Detachment is not abandonment. It is not cutting them off cold turkey. It is absolutely not ceasing to care or ceasing to love them.
Okay. So what is true detachment then? How do you practice it?
Detachment is the conscious, deliberate acceptance that you, as one human being, cannot control another adult's choices. You cannot control their feelings, their anxieties, or the ultimate outcome of their life path. It's about learning to stay emotionally present, still loving them, still caring, but without absorbing her child's anxiety as your own.
So you can feel empathy for their struggle.
Yes, deep empathy. You can love them fiercely, but you accept, fundamentally, that their success, their problems, their solutions are ultimately their responsibility, not yours.
Which makes it the direct antidote to enmeshment, right? If the problem was that shared emotional skin, that fusion of identities.
Exactly. Detachment is the act of unfusing. It's creating that healthy emotional space between you and your adult child. It's allowing the mother, as one source beautifully put it, to learn to walk home to yourself, finding her center again, separate from the child's state.
And why is this internal shift the absolute prerequisite? Why can't you just start saying no?
Because if the mother is still emotionally fused, if her self-worth is still tied to the child's success or approval, then every time she tries to set an external boundary, every time she tries to say no to that request for rent money, it will inevitably collapse. It will crumble under the weight of her own overwhelming guilt, her own anxiety. What if he really does end up on the street? It'll be my fault. Or the child's predictable backlash. The internal foundation has to be solid first.
Okay. Detachment with love. That's the internal groundwork. Once that shift begins, once the mother starts deciding, I will not let my child's anxiety dictate my actions or my peace of mind. What are the next concrete steps? Redrawing the financial map.
Yes, this is where the practical changes happen. The mother's role has to undergo a fundamental shift. She needs to consciously step down from the role of project manager or chief financial officer or emergency fixer for her adult child's life.
And step into what role instead?
The sources suggest shifting to the role of consultant or maybe coach, someone who offers advice, guidance, perspective if asked, but who is no longer taking responsibility for the outcome or providing the bailout funds.
Okay, consultant, not fixer. How does she start making that shift financially?
It has to start with objectivity and a firm commitment to self-prioritization. Step 1, you absolutely must complete that generosity audit we talked about earlier. Get those hard quantitative numbers down on paper. No more guessing, no more minimizing. You need the data.
Know exactly how much is flowing out.
Exactly. Step 2, and this is non-negotiable according to the experts, schedule a meeting with your own financial advisor. Not to talk about the child's finances, but about yours. You need to fully grasp the long-term impact your current level of generosity is having on your own financial health in your 70s, 80s, 90s. Get a professional, objective projection.
So arm yourself with the facts first.
Yeah.
Then what?
Then, step 3, create a realistic, structured support budget. If, after prioritizing your own needs, you decide you can still offer some financial help, it needs to be treated like any other budget category. It needs a firm limit.
How do you determine that limit?
The mother must figure out what she can truly afford, keyword truly, but only after she has fully funded her own essential retirement contributions and rebuilt her own 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Her financial safety net comes first, period.
And what if, after doing that calculation honestly, the amount she can truly afford is zero?
Then 0 is the answer. The sources are definitive on this. If the carefully calculated number, prioritizing her own security, is $0, then $0 is the firm, non-negotiable boundary she must set. Her financial survival has to take precedence. It's not selfish, it's responsible.
Okay. So establish the limit, even if it's 0. Then there's the type of help. You mentioned shifting from a passive handout to an empowering hand-up. What does that mean in practice?
It means making a strategic shift in what you pay for, if anything. The sources strongly advise immediately stopping payments for ongoing consumption.
Resumption line.
Like handing out indiscriminate money with no strings attached, paying for recurring expenses like rent, utilities, groceries, cell phone bills, credit card minimums. These kinds of payments create passive dependency. They essentially subsidize the adult child staying stuck. Those regular handout payments should be viewed as toxic to their growth and to the relationship.
So stop paying the bills that just maintain the status quo. Instead,
Instead, if your own finances allow it, and if the child is genuinely making an effort, you might consider supporting things that build assets. Support purchases that build your child's financial foundation, as one expert put it. Maybe a one-time gift towards a down payment on a modest home, assuming they qualify for the mortgage themselves. Or perhaps offering a structured written loan with clear repayment terms, specifically to help them pay off high-interest, crippling debt, like credit cards. The key difference is this type of help supports forward movement and requires their participation, rather than just funding stagnation.
Okay. And the absolutely critical piece to avoid falling back into the enabling trap.
Tying any help, if offered, directly to the child's demonstrable effort, not just to their latest crisis or plea.
Effort, not crisis. How does that work?
This is fundamental. It forces the adult child to have skin in the game. It shifts them out of that passive victim role, poor me, I need rescuing, and into being an active participant in solving their own problems.
So instead of just handing over rent money when they say they're short?
You might say something like, I understand you're in a tight spot with rent. I'm willing to help with 1 month's payment, but only if you provide me with proof that you've applied for at least 20 relevant jobs this week and followed up on them. You tie the help directly to their action.
Or instead of just paying off their credit card debt.
You could offer a matching system. I see you're serious about tackling this debt. For the next 6 months, I will match every dollar that you personally earn and save specifically towards paying down that card. It requires them to do the work, and you're amplifying their effort, not replacing it.
So the mother is shifting from being the bank of mom to being maybe the motivation coach.
Exactly. She's providing structure, accountability, maybe some strategic financial leverage, but she's no longer just the perpetual ATM machine dispensing cash for crises.
Okay, the financial strategy is clear. Audit, prioritize self, budget support, if any, shift from handouts to hand-ups, and tie help to effort. But now, the really hard part for many, delivering the message. How do you actually say no, or things are changing, without blowing up the relationship?
The communication is absolutely key. A boundary is only as strong as the way it's communicated and upheld. The goal, according to the sources, is to be calm, firm, and non-controlling. You want to state your new reality clearly, but with love and respect.
Not angry, not blaming, not punitive.
No. That just invites defensiveness and escalates conflict. The sources recommend a really powerful framework, a kind of 3-part compassionate boundary formula designed specifically to minimize defensiveness and keep the focus on the mother's own needs and choices.
Okay, a formula sounds helpful. What are the 3 parts?
Part 1. Start with compassion and love. You explicitly affirm the relationship and your care for them. It softens the message that follows. You might start with, honey, I love you deeply, and I know things have been really challenging for you lately.
Okay, lead with love. Makes sense. Part 2.
Part 2. State the truth, but use I statements. This is absolutely vital. I statements focus on your feelings, your realizations, your limits. They are non-arguable. No one can tell you that you don't feel what you feel, and they avoid blame.
So instead of, you need to stop asking me for money,
You'd say something like, and I realize that I've been trying to solve problems for you that aren't actually mine to solve, and I see now that it hasn't truly helped either of us in the long run. Or, perhaps more personally, I feel overwhelmed and, honestly, quite anxious when I'm constantly worried about your finances on top of my own. I have realized that this pattern is harming my own financial security and my emotional health. See the difference. It's about your experience.
Huge difference. It's taking responsibility for your past actions, enabling and stating your current feelings and limits. Okay, and part 3.
Part 3. State the new boundary. Clearly, simply, kindly, but without apology or excessive explanation. So from this point forward, I will no longer be able to pay your rent. Or my role in helping you is going to change. I am always here to listen, to brainstorm solutions with you, or help you find resources, but I am no longer going to be providing financial bailouts.
Clear, direct, future focus.
Exactly. Love first, then I statement about your realization or feeling, then the clear new boundary.
That I statement really is powerful. I feel overwhelmed, so I am making a new choice for my health. That's a statement of fact about your internal world. It's hard to argue with, but saying, you're irresponsible and taking advantage of me, that's just throwing fuel on the fire.
Completely different dynamic. The I statement owns your experience and your decision, making it much harder to attack effectively.
Okay, that's the planned conversation. But what about when you get caught off guard? The phone rings, it's a crisis, Mom, I need $500 by tomorrow. The pressure's intense. How do you handle that in the moment without caving?
You need a pre-planned script for that exact scenario, a way to break that reflexive yes that comes from panic. The sources suggest something simple that buys you crucial time.
Like what?
Like, wow, thank you for telling me about this difficult situation. That sounds really stressful. I need some time to think about that and look at my own budget and commitments right now. Let me get back to you tomorrow morning.
Okay. Buys time, lowers the immediate pressure.
Exactly. It allows your own anxiety to subside, lets you consult your budget, maybe rehearse your compassionate boundary statement, and then you can re-engage the conversation calmly and firmly from a place of strength, not panic.
That's smart. What about offering a different kind of help? The supportive no.
Yes, that's another great script to have ready. It maintains the connection and shows you care, but it fundamentally changes the currency of your help from money to time or knowledge.
So, you might say.
Oh, honey, I can hear how stressed you are about that bill. I'm really sorry you're in that position. Unfortunately, I'm not able to help you financially with it this time, but what I can do is sit down with you on Saturday afternoon. We could go through your budget together, or maybe research some options for debt consolidation, or even practice some interview skills if that would help.
So you're still offering support, but it's support that empowers them, requires their participation, and doesn't drain your bank account.
Exactly. You maintain the loving bond, but you redefine the resource you're willing and able to provide. It shifts from cash to coaching.
Okay, these scripts are practical, but let's be real. Implementing these changes, setting these boundaries, it's not going to be smooth sailing, is it? There's going to be pushback. We have to talk about weathering that storm, managing the backlash, and maybe even harder, managing the mother's own internal guilt flare-up.
This is absolutely the most difficult phase for most people, and it's crucial that the listener understands what to expect. When you start changing the unspoken rules of a long-standing and meshed family system, you will get backlash.
What kind of backlash?
Oh, it can range. Disrespect, anger, yelling, accusations, you don't love me anymore, silent treatment, tears, comparisons, well, grandma always helped dad, and the most powerful weapon, guilt tripping. How can you do this to me when I'm struggling so much after everything I've done for you?
And the key insight here is?
The key insight, counterintuitive as it sounds, is that the backlash is not a sign that you're doing something wrong or that the boundary is failing. Ironically, it's often a sign that the boundary is actually working. The system is being disrupted, and the other person is testing the new rules, trying to pull things back to the old, familiar, dysfunctional equilibrium.
They're pushing back because the dynamic is changing.
Exactly. They are reacting to the shift in power and responsibility.
You mentioned disrespect, the blaming, the entitlement, the accusations. Why is that such a potent tool against mothers especially?
Because, as we discussed with enmeshment, the mother's self-esteem, her very sense of worth as a good person and a good parent, is often deeply, fundamentally tied to how her child treats her and perceives her.
So when the child says, "You're selfish," or "You're a terrible mother,"
it cuts right to the core. It devastates her because her worth feels dependent on their approval, on maintaining that good mother image in their eyes. They know instinctively or consciously that hitting that button is the quickest way to make her doubt herself and potentially cave on the boundary.
So what's the defense against that? What's the new mantra?
The sources suggest a simple, powerful internal mantra. No more. Just that, no more.
No more what?
No more being an emotional punching bag for their frustrations. No more allowing them to walk all over you with disrespect. No more accepting blame for their adult choices. And critically, no more beating yourself up for the past mistakes, the past enabling that contributed to this situation. You acknowledge it, you learn from it, and you change course today. No more.
Okay. That's dealing with the external backlash. But you said the real battle is often internal. Managing that intense, deeply ingrained feeling of guilt when you say no, when you hear your adult child suffering and you don't rush in to fix it. How does a mother handle that?
This is the core work. She has to learn to relate to her guilt differently, to see it not as a direct command to act, but as a symptom of the old, unhealthy system trying to reassert itself.
How does she do that?
When that wave of guilt washes over her, and she needs to pause. Instead of immediately reacting by giving in, she needs to observe it. One source suggests literally thanking herself for seeing the guilt this time instead of immediately getting sucked in by it. Acknowledge its presence without obeying it.
Like becoming a curious observer of her own feelings.
Exactly. Embrace the guilt with curiosity. step back and ask herself some critical questions.
Questions like,
Is this my legitimate guilt? Did I actually do something morally wrong today by setting this boundary? Or is this a feeling that they are trying to give me, maybe unconsciously, to manipulate the situation back to the way it was?
distinguishing between authentic guilt and manufactured or projected guilt.
Yes. Or asking, am I feeling guilty because I violated a core value, or am I feeling guilty because I violated one of those toxic societal myths about the perfect, endlessly sacrificing mother? Separating your own values from imposed expectations.
Is it okay to apologize for past enabling? Does that help?
It can. Absolutely. Acknowledging your part in creating the dependency can be very healing. You could say, I realize now that by always stepping in to fix things, I didn't give you the chance to learn how to handle these things yourself. I'm truly sorry for that past pattern.
But the apology needs a follow-up.
Immediately. That apology must be followed directly with why the enabling stops today.
Yeah.
And that's precisely why things have to change now for both our sakes, so that you can build your own strength and independence, and so I can ensure my own well-being. You link the past mistake to the present necessity for change.
Okay, so acknowledge guilt, question its source, apologize for the past if needed, but hold the line for the future. What's the final reassurance for someone terrified of that guilt?
The final crucial reassurance is this. You will feel guilty sometimes. You will get pushback. That does not automatically mean your decision to set boundaries is wrong. In fact, it usually means you're finally prioritizing your own sanity, your own financial survival, and paradoxically, giving your child the actual gift they need most, the opportunity and the necessity to finally grow up.
All right, we've navigated the really tough terrain of setting boundaries and managing backlash. Now, let's focus on the positive outcome, the gold, as you called it earlier. This is about what fills the space that all that enabling, anxiety, and constant sacrifice used to occupy. It's about reclaiming your future and, crucially, reclaiming yourself.
Exactly. And that reclamation process starts, very practically, with repairing the mother's own financial future. This is especially critical for our listeners, women maybe in their 60s, 70s, or even 80s, who might feel like they've lost precious time.
So the money saved by stopping the enabling, where does it go first?
The sources are absolutely unanimous on this. The very first dollar of income that is no longer flowing out to the adult child needs to go immediately, directly into the mother's own retirement savings or towards rebuilding her depleted emergency fund. No exceptions.
Prioritize yourself financially first. I know personal finance gurus like Sue Zorman are really emphatic about this. They say securing your own retirement isn't selfish. It's actually the greatest kindness a parent can do for their children. Why is that?
Because by ensuring your own robust financial independence for your later years, you are preventing yourself from becoming a financial burden on your children when you might be elderly, perhaps frail, maybe needing expensive care.
So setting financial boundaries now protects them later.
Precisely. It protects them from having to potentially sacrifice their own family's financial well-being to support you down the road. It preserves your dignity and independence, and it protects the quality of your relationship with them in the long run. It's the ultimate future-oriented act of responsible support for the whole family.
Okay, so prioritize retirement funding. And you mentioned rebuilding the emergency fund, that safety net.
Absolutely critical. You must immediately focus on reestablishing that 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Think of it as your own personal soft landing.
Why is that so important in this specific context?
Because having your own financial buffer, your own stability, acts as an emotional shield. When the next inevitable crisis call comes from the adult child, if you know your own foundation is secure, you won't be triggered by the same level of anxiety. You won't feel that desperate urge to rush in and fix their problem out of fear that their instability might somehow threaten your basic security. It gives you the calm confidence to stick to your boundaries.
Makes sense. Your oxygen mask first. Okay, so financially, it's about redirecting funds to secure your own future. And the mother's role shifts, you said, from bank to coach.
Yes. The new role is about giving knowledge and fostering accountability, not just providing cash infusions.
What kind of knowledge?
Practical life skills if the child is receptive. She might offer to help them learn about budgeting tools, explain how credit scores work, talk through strategies for negotiating with lenders or landlords. She could guide them towards resources, maybe job training programs or government assistance options they can apply for themselves.
So she's guiding the process, sharing wisdom.
But the child is doing the actual work, the heavy lifting. She's empowering them with information, not enabling them with money.
Now, we have to acknowledge many mothers listening after maybe decades of overgiving might look at their own financial situation now and feel, well, panicked, overwhelmed, maybe feeling like it's too late for them, that they're too far behind.
That feeling is completely understandable and very common. But the goal here isn't necessarily achieving some perfect financial picture overnight. It's about progress. It's about momentum, starting now. This recovery process, rebuilding your own security, it demands self-trust, maybe some creativity in finding ways to save or earn, and above all, immense self-compassion.
Self-compassion, that sounds key.
You have to learn to be at least as kind and forgiving to yourself in your own financial recovery journey as you were, perhaps destructively, to your child financially for all those years. Acknowledge where you are. Forgive yourself for past choices made out of love or guilt, and focus on the positive steps you can take today. Even small steps build momentum.
Okay, so the financial recovery is step one of the reward. But perhaps the deeper, more profound reward is what you called rediscovering the self. Moving beyond that all-consuming mother-provider role.
This is huge. For many women, especially those who dedicated decades primarily to raising children and managing a household, their identity became completely fused with that role. Being the fixer, the provider, the manager of everyone else's needs, that was their sense of purpose.
So when that role necessarily shrinks as children become adults and hopefully more independent,
it's entirely normal, even predictable, to experience a kind of identity crisis, a feeling of, who am I now that they don't need me in the same way? Or maybe, who am I if I'm not constantly sacrificing for them?
but the sources argue that motherhood shouldn't erase the self.
Exactly. Ideally, motherhood, like any major life role, should expand the self, add a rich dimension, but not erase the core individual underneath. The critical task in this recovery phase is for the woman to start asking herself, maybe for the first time in years, what brings me joy? What are my passions? What is my purpose, separate and distinct from being a mother or a provider?
That can be a scary question if you haven't asked it in a long time. What are some concrete, actionable steps someone can take to start rebuilding that essential self-identity, that sense of inherent worth?
The key is to start small, but be incredibly consistent. One powerful exercise suggested is this. For 1 week, just 1 week to start, deliberately put yourself first in one small way each day.
Put yourself first.
Add one simple you-focused task, something purely for your own enjoyment, growth, or well-being to the very top of your to-do list each morning. And do it first.
What kind of task?
It could be anything. Taking a 20-minute walk, just for pleasure. Reading a chapter of a novel. Calling a friend you haven't spoken to in ages. Spending 30 minutes researching a hobby you used to love. Learning one new thing online. The specific task doesn't matter as much as the act itself.
The act of consciously prioritizing yourself.
Yes. It's a quiet but powerful act of defiance against that old martyr identity that said, my needs always come last. It starts rewiring the brain.
And redefining self-care is probably part of this too.
Absolutely essential. We need to rescue the concept of self-care from just being about, bubble baths and spa days, although those are nice too. True self-care in this context is a necessity, not a luxury. It's the deliberate, proactive, and consistent activities that are fundamental for maintaining your mental health, your emotional resilience, and your sheer ability to tolerate the anxiety that comes with letting your adult child navigate their own struggles.
So exercise, healthy eating, sleep, mindfulness.
Yeah.
Those become non-negotiable.
They have to be. And beyond that, it's about actively reconnecting with your own lost passions. What hobbies did you used to love? What talents have gone unused? Is there education you dreamed of pursuing? Community work that calls to you? What makes you feel alive and engaged? Completely separate from what makes your children happy or successful.
Finding joy and purpose outside the family role. Now, to really solidify this sense of inherent worth that isn't dependent on the children, the sources mention building something called recovery capital. What's that?
Recovery capital refers to the internal and external resources a person accumulates that help them initiate and sustain recovery from any challenging situation, including this kind of codependent dynamic. A huge piece of it is building social capital.
Social capital meaning?
Friendships, community connections, support groups, hobbies that involve other people building a rich network of relationships and activities that are not related to your children. The mother needs to consciously rebuild her world, her support system, outside of the family structure she was previously fused with.
Why is that so important?
Because it proves to her, on a deep experiential level, that her life is full, meaningful, and supported, even when her children are independent and living their own separate lives. It dismantles the fear that she'll be alone or irrelevant without them needing her constantly.
And the ultimate reward of all this work, the financial repair, the self-care, the rediscovery of passion, the building of social capital, is that profound internal shift.
It's realizing, truly knowing in your bones, that your self-worth is inherent. It is not dependent on your child's success. It's not dependent on their behavior towards you. It's not dependent on how much they appreciate your past or present sacrifices. It just is.
The very act of pulling back, setting those boundaries, investing in your own life, that action itself proves your worth to yourself.
It does. It demonstrates self-respect and self-value at a deep cellular level. Your worth is simply yours based on who you are as a person, not on what you provide to others. And achieving that self-compassion, that self-acceptance, that's what finally allows you to be at peace, truly at peace, regardless of your adult child's choices or circumstances.
And that peace, that solid sense of self, that's what allows for the final beautiful outcome we talked about at the start, a new kind of relationship with your adult child.
Yeah.
Healthy, adult, and free.
Exactly. The old dysfunctional parent-child dynamic, the enmeshed system, the provider-recipient transaction, that's over. It has to be. The new relationship that emerges, hopefully, is truly adult to adult.
Based on what?
Based on mutual respect, not obligation. Based on choice, not dependency. The mother consciously shifts from that mode of actively parenting, fixing, managing, controlling, to simply standing by to love, to support appropriately, maybe to coach or consult if needed and if she chooses, but no longer driving the bus.
And the sources emphasize that when those unhealthy ties, the financial transactions, the emotional guilt tripping finally stop, what's left is the real connection.
Hopefully, yes. If a genuine bond exists underneath all the dysfunction, this process allows it to surface. The child is no longer connected to the mother primarily out of raw dependency or obligation, and the mother is no longer connected to the child primarily out of guilt, anxiety, or fear of abandonment.
So the connection that remains or maybe reforms over time.
It will be one based on genuine choice, mutual affection, shared history perhaps, but fundamentally respect for each other as separate, autonomous adults.
And that sounds like the real reward. A healthy relationship where, as the sources say, you can finally share moments of joy together, where the mother can just be genuinely curious about her child's life, interested in who they are becoming.
Instead of constantly feeling the need to critique it or fix it or manage it or stress over it, where both mother and child are, at long last, truly free to relate to each other out of love, not need or obligation. Hashtag outro. So just to wrap this up and summarize the path forward. This journey of reclaiming your life, moving from enabling provider back to a healthy parent of an adult, it really rests on 4 key pillars we've discussed. First, that crucial internal detachment unfusing your identity and worth from your child's.
Right. Starting inside.
Second, implementing clear financial boundaries, prioritizing your own retirement, auditing the outflow, and shifting any support towards conditional handouts, not open-ended handouts. Third, using firm, compassionate communication, those loving I statements, to clearly state the new rules of engagement.
Calm, firm, non-controlling.
Exactly. And fourth, developing resilience to backlash, understanding that the inevitable guilt, anger, or pushback is a temporary, predictable storm, a sign the system is changing for the better, ultimately, for both of you.
And the outcome of navigating these 4 pillars, it's clear, isn't it? By initiating this, strategic withdrawal and this deep act of reclaiming herself, the listener, you, can finally build the very thing you probably always wanted deep down.
Which is?
A truly respectful, genuinely loving adult relationship with your child. But one that's achieved not through endless, draining sacrifice, but through your own personal strength, your financial freedom, and a foundation of radical self-honesty.
Beautifully put. And remember this core truth we started with. Your worth is no longer determined by how much you give away, but by the wholeness, the self-respect you reclaim.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. What one small step, just one, will you take today? Maybe it's starting that financial audit. Maybe it's drafting an I statement script for a future conversation. Or maybe it's simply adding that one small you-focused task to the top of your list right now. What step will you take today to prioritize your own recovery and begin rebuilding your inherent self-worth?